be a video about the Iron Man 2 game for the PSP. So the Iron Man 2 game, and this game is a very rare game in my area. So I only found it in this one pawn shop. So Iron Man 2, it is a movie game, and it is, again, a video game based on a movie. So, and basically, Iron Man 2 movie, that was the one with, what was the name? Whiplash, you had Iron Man at the Mark 5 suit, at the Mark 7 suit, War Machine, etc. So this one here, basically, it looks at a different perspective from the movie. It gives you more. There's like more villains. There's more areas. So starting out now, like with the gameplay, is like a third person, literally like a third person kind of shooter action adventure game. So you play as the Iron Man, right? And first off, the gameplay reminds me a lot. There was a mobile game. I can't remember where I saw it or what it was called. It's a mobile game that you could play. I played the game from like a third person perspective, and I think it was like a Marvel game. And graphically, gameplay wise, this game plays very similar, to that. Now, the Iron Man, this game is basically a third person action. You're shooting enemies via rocket launchers, turrets, the repulsors, the unibeam, and a customization in terms of you upgrade these, different offensive abilities, etc. No, the gameplay is very straightforward, right? You shoot enemies in certain areas, move on, more enemies, shoot enemies, take out enemy generators, enemy, kind of, diffuse bombs. There's like these mini puzzles that you have to do, right? Align a certain array, and yeah, so most of the gameplay is that, and certain levels will have a bosses that you have to take out. Now, one of the coolest things of the gameplay is the flight. So you basically press. It is a little confusing. So you press down, and the down, a directional button, and you fly, right? More so that you hover, but there are certain flight missions. So if you ever play the Iron Man 3 mobile game where it's a constant speed flight, and you gotta shoot down a projectiles enemies. It is. There are some sequences where it is like that. Well, out the flight gives you an aerial, advantage over the enemies that you shoot them down, right? And lots of different enemies, right? You have this one. There's like AIM. There's Roxxon, right? Roxxon is like as like another kind of evil corporation in the Marvel universe, and lots different enemies. From you have the henchmen, the normal enemies, and you have the mini boss enemies, the taller bot enemies, bosses, main bosses, etc. Now, for the game, visually, that is it is to be expected because it is a PSP game, and very similar. Some PSP games look worse than PS2 games, as I would imagine back then, back at the time. They could only they didn't have the technological advancements in terms of graphics that they have now. So it's gonna look very, some areas are gonna look very blurry. It's gonna look, there's gonna be very bad resolution. But I am used to it as I play a lot of PSP games and older games, so I used to it. Now, in terms of some of the sound design, the audio is pretty solid in certain areas. Now, another a thing with the game is that there's gonna be certain level of design glitches, and control problems. Now, at the level of design, for example, there'll be a certain area where you have to take out all enemies, but there's always that one enemy that's missing, or that's glitched behind a wall, right? Or that's there'll be like an area where you gotta find at the objective, and the objective is glitched. So sometimes you're gonna run into those problems. Now, it is best to you can always restart the checkpoint, refresh the checkpoint, look back at certain areas, and kind of, if you have to, sometimes you have to restart an entire level and to get past that glitch, right? Another thing to control. So the controls, the aiming, more so like with the aiming. So the aiming used with a lot of these, if it's a shooting, if it's like a shooter, first person, third person, you press the X, square, triangle, circle buttons, the shape buttons to kind of move the camera. So to move the camera as you aim. So now, certain bosses or certain sequences where you have to adjust the camera to hit a weak point, it is a nightmare because you don't hit the specific weak point, and then a yard of motion, and you're not doing any a damage after this thing, right? So you got to be very the controls the aiming controls, it is a pain in the ass sometimes. Now, as I said before, it is best to have you have a certain loadout and you can choose to play as a War Machine or Iron Man. It is best to have like the rocket launcher as the secondary fire, as it does more damage. It is more kind of, it does tracking, so it does track at the enemy, right? And it's just better, right? Just better overall. There's like a turret that a War Machine has, however, it is a little slow and it doesn't do the damage output. The best weapon, in my opinion, is probably the repulsor. So like the hand blaster or the hand cannon or whatever I call it, the repulsor. You can use like a double repulsor, right? But as I said before, like with the aiming can be a little annoying. I am at this one part now in the game where there's like a giant mech, some sort of a gigantic robot, and in order to take down a robot, you gotta hit a weak point. And the auto aiming doesn't want to hit at the weak point, and then like I'm literally stuck at that level. So yeah. Now Iron Man 2 game by Sega. I don't know if it has multiplayer, and there's also a PS3 version out there or a 360 version out there. I see some of them are very overpriced, so you gotta really know where to look. Check a pawn shop, a retro game store, and in my area, PSP games. I talked to a pawn shop owner, and he's saying, the same thing. PSP games are becoming more and more and more rare, right? So they're becoming more rare in certain areas. But yeah, Iron Man 2. This is the Iron Man 2 movie game, and interesting a detail. Speaking of movie games, I didn't know they had a Spider-Man 2 game for the PSP, right? So yeah, that is my Iron Man 2 game video. Please subscribe, share the video. Thank you.